Ooh, hello, I'm Noah Vortex, and this is going to be another stream consciousness video. I want to talk on a very controversial subject, one which is, in a lot of ways, is not really a subject that, in a lot of ways, a lot of people would say I really shouldn't have the authority to speak on it, but I'm going to speak on it anyway because I've been having some debates online about this idea and this issue, so I thought I'd just reel off like my positions and what I think on it. So we're going to be talking about identity, trans people, and what is a woman? How do we define what a woman is? Because obviously this is a very hot, burning topic in the culture wars at present, and it's very important. I mean, I'll state my position explicitly from the start. I am pro-trans rights, basically. Pro-trans. I think trans people deserve the same rights and recognitions from society as everybody else. I think using someone's preferred pronouns is just respectful, and there's no point really, I don't think, making a big deal about it in terms of the pronoun usage. And it's not been, I haven't immediately landed at that position. It was not like I woke up one day with that perspective. It's taken actually a few years to arrive at that conclusion, or that understanding of it. So especially with the pronouns, non-binary pronouns, I was a bit resistant to that at first. Like I thought it was a bit, I didn't really understand it. But I think this is very much an issue where you have to really dive into a lot of theory actually, and also people's experiences, and also talk to one of the most, in a lot of ways, one of the most important ways that I've developed my understanding and, I guess, acceptance of trans people and the whole issue is by meeting trans people. That's it. Like in my life, knowing trans people and having conversations with them and being able to develop my understanding of what their experience is. I think that's the only way you can really get a real understanding of what a person's about and their experience and everything else, which is obvious. But so yeah, I think there's a current obsession which is driven a lot, I think, by the conservative right, but there's elements of there certainly is elements of the, obviously, feminism, which is very hardcore against the redefinition of, in their eyes, a woman, or redefinition of what that means, or a sort of examination, but it's interesting because, I mean, obviously feminism is a broad church. It's not my particular area of knowledge. I obviously know a bit about it, but I've never really read proper hardcore feminist texts. It's interesting to see. I mean, obviously a very big feminist theorist who is markedly against the sort of idea of men who had become women as trans women being accepted, as it were, into the definition of a woman is Germaine Greer, author of The Female Eunuch, which I've not read, and I'm not that familiar with her theory, so I'm not going to pretend that I am, or sort of attack her on any sort of theoretical level. But I think essentially, so I'll go to sort of, it's very difficult to define. I think I should define some terms, I guess. So, I mean, gender and sex is a very complicated area of human. It's a spectrum, I suppose, in some respects. Obviously, there is. I do believe in biological sex. I do believe there is chromosomally, but there's variation with that within that even as well. So like, um, obviously I think you are born, generally speaking, most people I know, because there are intersex people who exist, but you are generally born with a sex. That's true. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny that that is a fact, a physical fact. You're born with a certain hormonal level and also, well, genitalia, a dick or a vagina, basically. Or if you're intersex, you're born with a sort of combination of both, which can happen, but it's very minority. But I guess it comes down to a question of categorization. So, I mean, even people who, people who are born male, they may, they can be more masculine, or they can be more feminine, which are again the categories of behaviour which we assign to. We have behaviours or signifiers which we believe are more masculine or feminine. But a lot of those things are culturally created, so a lot of them are culturally generated. Mode of dress is an obvious thing, really. That's a sort of cultural construct, I think. So the idea that men dress a certain way in suits or whatever, traditionally like a masculine appearance with tie, or women wear summer dresses, and well, that's very obvious. But the interesting thing about and I think trans people have existed for a long time, like even on some sort of level. Obviously, the technology is starting to catch up to the point where they can, really like externally change their appearance to the point where they're indistinguishable from cis women, I guess. Which is, I think, is a big part of the issue. Actually, it's the appearance, the sort of fact that a lot of trans women now will be indistinguishable in appearance from a cis woman. Because I'm going to say it, they are women. They are like if you are in okay. There's a lot of things to break down here. Like we do, as human beings, we process the world visually, and we will categorize things based on a sort of, again, I guess, a sort of like visual imprint. There's a lot more than that, but like if you're just talking purely on a level of aesthetics, then I think trans women in general, and I know this is a big issue with the trans community. I don't know exactly how to approach it really, as a cis guy who, is there's this whole thing of like passing, I guess, which is basically that if you're out and if a trans woman is out and about and she felt like she was indistinguishable from like a normal typical cis woman, that would be what's called a passing. I know it's a very sort of thing, but I don't know. But yeah, so I think going back to the definition of womanhood, because obviously women have had a lot of struggles, and the women. So you can, I guess you can sort of define it in several ways. There's obviously the biological determinist sense, which is you've got a womb, you've got a vagina, you have physical aspects. Also, you could say that a woman is someone who has these nurturing aspects, more emotionally in tune with their own emotions. I think there is a degree of truth to that men in general are, sort of much more competitive naturally, and it all roots back to sort of like our origins, really, I think. But I think that can become determinist too, to the point where you sort of say, all men are stoic and women are all emotional. And I don't think emotionality is basically none of these prescribed behaviour patterns really help either gender, to be honest, male or female, because obviously the crisis of masculinity at present is that is there is a perception that men have this inability to be able to talk about their emotions, I suppose. But then I think there's a certain strength to that sometimes. I mean, it's just a sort of thing, but I'm rambling a bit now. But yeah, I think essentially my sort of take on this is that there is a difference between, on some level, between a cis and trans woman. Obviously, I mean, we literally have two prefixes, trans and cis, to categorise that difference. So I don't really understand the arguments that are being put against this sort of inclusion of trans women, I suppose, into the broader definition of woman. Sorry. So I just don't. I mean, people talk about predatory trans women, which is, I think, is a false narrative. I mean, there are very minority random examples of like predatory men using maybe the pretending to be like trans women, I suppose, on some level to. I mean, Jessica Yanni is the obvious example I can think of, which is Chris Chan maybe. And the problem is that like these are these are not like, you know, most trans people are in one way or another like definitely not that. I don't think it really needs to be explored that. I find the idea that men would go through an incredibly difficult transition phase just simply to. It paints a very bad. Well, it's working from the presumption that men are as extremely negative and destructive beings, which, sure, on some levels, the negative side of masculinity can be violence, certainly, and yeah, sure, sexual coercion, or there are obviously men who sexually assault women more than women sexually assault men. That's just a fact. There's no disputing that. But I find this idea that there's men out there who are transitioning, going through a very difficult process of hormones and everything else to become women, to just purely to get access to women's spaces, is completely paranoid. I don't think there's any basis in statistics. I don't think there's any basis in anything really to justify that being a thing. And that seems to be one of the main arguments, is that against like trans women's inclusion into like the general world of like the feminine and the female, I guess, female world, is that, and I don't see it. I don't understand why that is even a line of argumentation that's really pursued by these people. So yeah, I'm trying to keep this sort of respectful and open and everything, but it's a very fraught area. I think obviously we're going through a transitional phase in terms of like our development as human species, like masculinity and femininity. These sort of often cast iron ideas and sort of constructs of how we behave are being questioned at the minute. Some people would say it's down to postmodernism, I guess, or some people would say it's sort of a re-examination because we live in just a very different age technologically. It can communicate differently, and different expectations put on genders now, which ironically enough is largely a result of like second or third wave feminism actually. So it's interesting to see how there's like a sort of split in. First, obviously, you've got intersectional feminism, which is including like different races more, and including trans women often as well, and like, you know, queer experience and everything else. And then you've got like this sort of, I won't call it the term that everybody used, but you know, the sort of radical, more like traditional, not traditional necessarily actually, sorry, like the sort of radical trans exclusionary thing. But really actually a lot of these sort of conflicts and redefinitions of gender have emerged because of feminism, because of like second or third wave feminism. That's why a lot of it is here. That's why we're dealing with a lot of this stuff. And I'm not. This is not an attack on feminism. I think feminism's a continuing, evolving system of ideas, and like any system of ideas, it will change. It will morph. Everything will change all the times and mutate into something different. But I'm just sort of pointing that out. I guess that there's a certain irony to that. Maybe I guess the fact that there is this split is because of the things that emerged from the original movement itself. But anyway, I've talked 15 minutes now. I don't know if I can cover much more. Basically, what I think is that trans people, men and women, should have equality of rights, same protections. They should be free from discrimination and all that stuff. It's just human rights, really. It's human rights. Trans rights are human rights is basically what I'm saying. And yes, I understand that trans women are not chromosomally women, but I just think it's a basic question of just human dignity and respect to obviously call. If someone has a pronoun, don't dead name them. Just call them by the pronoun that they want to be known by, because by not doing that, you are being pedantic and dying on a hill for really just for what? Just to make someone feel shit who's probably been through a lot of stuff as well to get to where they are. I just think it's, and like I said, I've evolved my views on a lot of this. I was very I wouldn't say I was but I was sort of very skeptical of the whole thing for a while, and like I said, meeting and just talking to trans people helped me get over that and helped me understand that it's a basic human rights thing, and also the sort of exaggerated claims of trans exclusionary feminism is like it's just it's sort of aligning with sort of conservative right wing thing as well. So I think I'll leave it at that and I'll